Okay, this time we're going to talk about our wedding. Yay! The one thing we wanted in our wedding was to really honor God. And we spent a lot of time on the wedding itself. We didn't spend as much time on the reception afterwards, but we did have a lot of help on that. We paid for our wedding and reception ourselves. We did have one of the bridesmaids was Sochil Solis.
Yes, and she made my wedding dress and all 4 of my bridesmaids' dresses. And she did a beautiful job, and you'll see the pictures to show for that. It was amazing. And it was a real, I remember we went into a bridal shop. I went with Sochil because we wanted to see what certain dress styles looked like on me. And we knew she was going to make it, but it would help to imagine, what would be the best, style to go with. And as I'm trying them on and coming out, and Sochil is there with me, it was an amazing, beautiful moment. That first time I saw myself in a wedding dress, and I stood there and looked in the mirror and I cried.
Oh, wow.
And I cried because I realized for all, for reasons that I'll go into and talk more about when I'm sharing my story. But bless her heart, my mom, who I love dearly, was deeply wounded and really could not embrace that I was getting married.
Yeah.
And she just chose not to be a part of the process of getting ready for the wedding. And that truly broke my heart. And Sochil knew that and totally understood, and she was right there for me. She was like a sister to me, really was. And we got through it together, and that was precious. Yeah, but I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. Her parents, they just told us, we want you to have a really small wedding, and basically they were saying, we want to run the wedding. And so we just talked about it, and we just said thanks but no thanks. You can show up, but that's it.
And we didn't have a large wedding, but I mean, we
50 people maybe.
Yeah. And we just knew we knew the kinds of things that we wanted to do and the people that we wanted to be a part of it and helping us and all of that. And God was wonderful. I mean, we had so much help.
Yeah.
And
Sochil's mother really took over the reception. I mean,
she really helped us a lot.
She bought our wedding cake for us. She had a connection through her church with a food wholesaler, and so we had a whole spread of food. She took care of it all.
She made potato salad for all of us. She made it herself. And then she was able to do a lot of other things, again, through their connections where they got their food for their church meals. She was able to get things for us. And we were able to do it much. And we had KFC chicken.
Yes.
That was our meat.
That's what we could afford.
That was our meat and we had to pay a little extra so that we had enough white meat, so it wasn't all like Dave. Okay, Dad, Grandpa, he likes dark meat, and our story. I like white meat, and together we're the whole chicken. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that goes way back because our wedding was KFC chicken, and he thought it was. We have to pay more because we have to have enough white meat, because most people tend to go for white meat, and that's what KFC was explaining to us. So yeah.
Yeah. And we had the reception at Patti's apartment complex, and they had a big room that you could rent for $25. Now back then, $25 was a little more, but it was nothing compared to what we would have paid.
Right, and it was perfect for us because again we were, now we have Christmas dinners and we have 40 people here, you know? So I mean, it was just a great group of our closest friends and family who just gathered around us and loved and supported us. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we even worshipped at our reception. We had an old phonograph, a record player set up, and we had some records that were Christian records, and they didn't have praise and worship music per se out at this time, but we just played some of those records, and excuse me, a lot of us just stood up and held hands and were just worshiping God.
It was great. It was great. And another thing that I just remembered, my very first real job was as a florist across from the high school where I was going to high school. And so after school, I would, that's where I would go, and I would work for a few hours every afternoon and then on Saturdays. And Janine, who owned the shop, she did all the flowers for our wedding and our reception. She was amazing. And she's so funny. She said, Patti, she said, I know your situation. She said, I am doing this. You just pay for the flowers.
Yeah.
My gift to you is the labor. You just pay for the cost of actually getting the flowers from the wholesaler, and I will do all the work for you.
That was incredible. That was incredible.
We had so much of that kind of help.
Yeah.
We just really were surrounded by people, especially adults, who were just really there for us, to support us.
The one negative thing about the reception was we had invited some relatives from out of town, and they were on Patti's side of the family, and they came. And I guess most of them stayed at your parents' place.
Yeah, there was my cousins and my aunt and uncle, and they stayed, which they did when they would come to town. They often did. They stayed with my parents, and my parents knew, because we communicated with them. They knew that we were having a reception and
what time it would be.
Right. Well, what they did is they trying to remember. They came to the reception. But then
they left halfway through.
They left. They didn't really have dinner with us. They left because they had made reservations for those family members and them at a restaurant just blocks from where we were having my apartment complex, and they just wanted to do that. They wanted to provide for and I remember my cousin coming up to me and just saying, Patti, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Anita, she went around with the guest book and had people sign the guest book, to all say that they had been there. And she said, Patti, I don't understand, but I guess we're going to have dinner, in the marina, and you guys are here having your reception. But we don't have our own car, so, we're... So it was just...
So they took about a third of, or a fourth of the people that were there and walked out.
Yeah. And it was after that what he had been referring to earlier, that we had our time where we had praise music on, and we were all just holding hands and just singing and worshiping, and we danced. We had fun dancing together, and all of that kind of stuff too. I mean, we had a really fun, good time together, and
even though it was, that part of it was heartbreaking, especially for Patti. God really comforted her through her grandmother, and just through everybody that was there.
Yeah, Esther was one of the people. My grandma Esther was one of the people that my mom had invited to this dinner.
Yeah, and
that was really heartbreaking. And Esther came up to me to say, Patti, I love you. And she said, I don't, this is your day. And she said, I don't want to, create a scene. And she said, I'm just going to choose to go with your mom. But please know I love you. And she showed us that in so many ways. We knew that was true.
Yeah. And then after the reception, we went because it was in Patty's apartment, we went up to her apartment and
Well, not in my apartment, in the apartment complex.
Well, in the apartment complex, yeah. And we went up there and Patty and I were getting ready to go, and we were going to go to a little honeymoon in Lake Tahoe. And the only reason we could do that is we put all the money into the wedding and we didn't have any money for the honeymoon. And when my parents came out, my dad found out and he slipped me enough money to pay for 3 to 4 days up in Lake Tahoe.
It was enough for us to fly up there and be in a hotel and cover our, he gave us a honeymoon.
Yeah. And so Sam and Ed were two of the guys in our group were driving us to the hotel, and where we were going to stay the night, and then we were going to take a cab to the airport, and you know. And Sam was just having a ball as we're driving there. He says, "Well, Dave," he said, "so listen," he said, "I mean, you know, you want to go bowling? You know, should we just stop and the 4 of us could go bowling?" And I was like, I don't think so, Sam. I kind of want to spend the time with my new bride. And he said, "Well, you got a lifetime to do that, Dave." He says, "How often do you get to go bowling with Ed and I?" You know.
He was having a lot of fun.
He was having a lot of fun.
A lot of fun teasing us. Yeah.
So he dropped us off there. We had a night in the airport at the hotel, and then we flew to Lake Tahoe, and Lake Tahoe is God's country.
It was absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, and the place we stayed at, the Villa Montreux, they gave us $2 in nickels to gamble at the casinos. And we gambled the $2 and we made an additional $1.80. So we came out ahead, but that was all we did at the casinos. We did go to their dinner theater and we saw the comedian, the impressionist Rich Little. Yeah. He was great.
He was really funny.
And he was very clean.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And let's see, we went horseback riding.
We drove. We were going to drive all the way around Lake Tahoe, but we didn't realize how far that was. You know, there was no GPS back then. Okay, you know, there was a map. Okay, you know, so we drove as far as we could go. You know, for a few hours and just took pictures and just absolutely enjoyed it. It was so beautiful. And around every curve there was another beautiful view of the lake and the trees, and I mean it was just gorgeous.
You couldn't take a bad picture.
Right.
And all we had was a little 110 Kodak little camera, but we got some great pictures of it. You know, and so that was really neat. Later on, after we were married a few months, Patty's family had a Thanksgiving dinner at her grandmother's and at Esther's, Esther and Rex's. And we went there as a married couple. And I hadn't really gotten to know Patty's brothers that well, but at the dinner, and they were younger than I was, so, but at...
they were, let's see, if I was 21, they were like 19 and 20.
19 and 20, and I was 25.
Yeah.
And no, you were 22. I was
just
27.
Turned 22.
Yeah, so they were like 20 and 21.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were talking about, you know, what they were pursuing in college, and boy, wouldn't it be great if there was this research that would tell them, well, what kind of jobs can you get in this area, about how much will you make, you know, and all that. And I just happened to know that there was, and so I said, well, there is. And they looked at me and they said, really, where? And I said, in your university library. It's just in the reference section, which I never went to. I found out about it later, but they were shocked, and I said, oh yeah, just go to the reference section and tell the librarian there that, you know, well, Steve wanted to be an oceanographer at the time, and so I said, yeah, just tell her you want to be an oceanographer and she'll be able to pull out all the relevant data for you. And this is the first time I really connected with them. And we were connecting.
They really were.
And that was
That
good.
was so great to see. It was so great to see Dave and Steve and Don really gelling together. And I think that was the dynamic of having, you know, another closer to their age male. You know, it's how I saw them interact when our cousins came down and they were with their cousin David, who was around our ages too. I mean, you know, guys, you know, when Tommy, you know, Thomas,
yeah. Yes,
now,
Thomas,
when
yes.
Thomas would get together with you three boys and just the
Oh,
the
boy.
dynamics that went on
Yeah.
and how it was like that. It was just so great
Yeah.
seeing how they were connecting. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
But when at the end of the meal, when Patti always would help clean up,
Yeah.
and she
Yeah.
went into the kitchen, and her mom was in there with Esther, her grandmother, and she was really kind of putting me down.
Yeah.
She was saying things like, "Oh, he's just a show off. It's all about him." And
You know how you can walk in with, they were at the sink, you know, and I walked into the kitchen behind them and I could hear them talking, and I just kind of stopped in the doorway and just was taking in what my mom was saying. And yeah, it was,
and
it was, to be, my mom was a deeply wounded person who never really embraced or realized that about herself.
yeah.
And everything happened to her rather than it was a result of choices she made from her woundedness. And that was, I understand that now. It was in that moment, it was all that I had seen going on, all the wonderful dynamics I'd been experiencing, watching Dave and my two brothers interact. It just collapsed, you know, and my heart sank. And Esther, bless her heart, was being positive. You know, she was saying, "Well, Dave seems to be," you know, Esther was being Esther, you know, and so anyway.
So yeah, Patti came out afterwards, and she was clearly upset. And I could see that. And so we left pretty soon after that. And she told me that when she came in and she heard that, she rushed to my defense. I mean, she just said, you know, "Mom, that's not who he is. And, you know, I don't appreciate you saying that," and things like that.
I was
and
much stronger than I knew at the time. I did not know how strong of a woman I was at that moment. I can look back now and see how strong I was.
yeah. And we talked about it afterwards. It was probably 2 days before she returned to her normal self. And I went before the Lord, and I just said, you know, I can't take this, God. I mean, there's something wrong here. I know we're supposed to honor our mother and father, but this is getting to the point where it's coming between us. And the Bible's very clear that marriage is a three-stranded cord. It's the husband, the wife, and Jesus. If anybody comes between that cord, they're out. And it took me a long time, a few months, to really come to that viewpoint, but I finally said, we're not going to be contacting them anymore. Now, they never contacted us anyway. So
Yeah, we would initiate any getting together with
Yeah.
them, or, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So that was in November of
Wow,
76.
Yeah.
And in December, we had planned to move back to Michigan. Or for me, it was moving back.
Right. We were beginning to talk about, you know, where do we want to be long term? And at the time, California was becoming what it is now in terms of real estate and all of that. But even back then, it was not in our financial means to, you know, start. We would have been in an apartment for a very long time, before we would ever imagine the idea of having a home. And not that that's a bad thing.
No.
I mean, it's just for us. But the biggest thing was, again, the gift I'd had of meeting his family the year before, and seeing they were so supportive through our whole wedding. That they came, and Mom and Dad were there for a good week, around the wedding, and they were just so supportive. And I got it that I would be leaving everything I knew, but I would be leaving everything I knew, and I would be going to people who genuinely loved me,
Yeah.
and cared about me, and cared about our marriage and our future together.
Yeah.
And we realized,
We added all that up together, and it's just like, why stay here?
Yeah.
And so we made the decision, I think it was in December, that we were going to move.
And then we started saving. We saved and saved and saved.
Because one of the great things we did is we said, we're going to drive home, because I had a car.
It was a
brown Pinto, the Brown Bob.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we said, you know what? We're probably never going to have this opportunity again.
Yeah.
So let's take a long drive across the U.S. We took 7 weeks.
7 weeks. That truly ended up, we had no idea, that truly ended up being our honeymoon, in the sense that we had 7 weeks on the road together. And we stopped at many places to see family and friends on our journey. And we had a lot of time, just the two of us, with all the places that we saw and things. And it was amazing. And, we packed everything. We shipped home. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, we
Our
shipped.
friend, my same friend, Soshio, who helped us so much with the wedding dresses and lots of other things that she did, we packaged up all these boxes of all our belongings.
Yeah, I got these boxes from my workplace, and they were huge.
Yeah.
And they had handles and everything.
Right, and we packaged them up, and back then, you could only take so many.
3 boxes to UPS a day.
Right.
We took at least 20 or 25, and then we had to leave.
Yeah. And
she tok the other 20 or so.
Yeah, and I know that sounds like a lot of stuff. Not surprising, he had a lot of books. But we were moving. Imagine moving your whole life, not moving to another place in a city, but moving your whole life.
Yeah, and we rented furniture, so we didn't have any furniture to take, but we just had a lot of stuff. And for Patti, that was her whole life.
Yeah.
For me, it was just a few years. Well, my books went for more than a few years, but all the other stuff was a few years. But for her, it was her whole life. Yeah. And so. Yeah, and we shipped them to my parents. Yeah. So they had like 45 of these boxes.
They just kept stacking them up in an empty bedroom for us.
Yeah. And we'll tell you about our trip on on the next episode. But 7 weeks we went through 28 states, and it was. And I'm so glad we did it, because obviously we have never had an opportunity to do that again. Yeah. And the really weird thing was, just about a month before we left, my dad came out because he was flying to Japan.
That's right, I forgot.
Yeah,
that's right.
Because he was going to take on this line of ceramics as a second career. And they didn't have camcorders at that time. They just had these movie cameras, and the film was kind of expensive, but developing it was real expensive. It cost, like back then, $15 to buy the film and develop it, and you got 3 minutes of film.
And you couldn't see it right away.
Yeah.
You couldn't preview it.
So on our way home, so we gave him some money. He bought a camera for us. And we didn't have time to take one roll of film to see how it worked out. Yeah. So we had 17 rolls of film over our whole 7-week trip, not knowing if any of it was going to come out. Well,
Yeah.
praise God, it all came out.
And so what that means, again, I love talking like this because you remember things and it clarifies things. So Romee is as old as our marriage.
Yeah, yeah,
I had not really put those two things together. So yeah.
yeah.
That's pretty special. Yeah.
So we will talk about our trip home on the next session. Bye.